Hey, welcome to episode 98 of Fresh Air at 5. So excited and glad that you are here listening. If you're a long-time listener, really appreciate you listening. If you're a first-time listener, appreciate that as well, and all in between. You know, I'm out here walking in the morning, and I'm out here sharing in the morning because I want to make a difference in your life and have you find some rich podcasts that you can take and listen to. I do listen to a number of podcasts. I don't listen to them all, but I listen to many of them. Hey, can you do me a favor? Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your other Apple or other podcast catchers so you can keep up with what's going on. In a couple episodes, I'm going to have some listener voices on there. Would you like to have your voice on my podcast? What I'm asking is coming up in the call to action. So take a listen to those details. And without further ado, here's Fresh Air at 5, episode 98. Call to action, November 15, 2022. All right, everybody, Fresh Air at 5 is going to be 100 episodes old in, well, this is episode 97 this is going into, and then moving on, we're going to be 98, 99, and 100 in about 3 weeks from now. And so as I'm prepping and thinking about episode 100, it's a milestone. It's a big milestone. You know, I cheer on podcasters for crossing that line. That's significant and really important. I want to thank all of you that have faithfully listened to Fresh Air at 5 over this past year, almost 2 years now. And there's been a lot of influence in why I do what I do. And shout outs to Sarah Johnson and Chris Nessie, Tim Cavey, Tim Stevenson, the boys down in California, Ryan and Brian from Check This Out podcast. We got Eric and Nick out on the East Coast. And, my parents, my friends and family here. And so this is a call to action. My call to action is I'd like to hear an audio clip from you or a video, something like that, about how Fresh Air at 5 has affected you. What is your connection to Fresh Air at 5? How long have you listened to Fresh Air at 5? If you haven't listened to Fresh Air at 5, but you listen to my dailies, you're effectively listening to Fresh Air at 5. So go over and click subscribe in a podcatcher to Fresh Air at 5 so you can listen. And I would like to hear from you, a 30-second to 1-minute audio clip about how Fresh Air at 5 has impacted you, this thing that I do every day. What do you think about that? Kelly Croy, I'm going to shout you out as well and put you into this list. So thank you all. Appreciate it. I've been fortunate to be a guest on a number of podcasts and connection with Scott Nunes as well. So I'm going to ask this, and I'm hoping to hear back from you, hopefully within the next 2 weeks by the end of November, so I can spin up your comments in episode 100 of Fresh Air at 5. All right, that's the call to action. Thank you. Bye.
I'm Jesse Lubinsky.
I'm Donnie Piercy.
Hi, I'm Jeffrey Heil, hosts of the Partial Credit Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network.
Just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood, to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at Fresh Air at 5 or check out my website, briancarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected. Hey, PLN, it's Monday, November 21, 2022. Out here for Fresh Air at 5, and it's 2 degrees Celsius. It's calm, which is really nice. And yes, had a great weekend. I hope you did. And we're sitting on the doorstep of episode 100 of Fresh Air at 5. So I've put out a call to action asking for listeners of the podcast and those that have listened a little bit or a lot to give me a reflection and 30-second to 1.5 minutes of your thoughts about how the content of Fresh Air at 5 has impacted you. Now, it's a consistent podcast that I'm putting out, but it's not necessarily consistent content as far as exactly what I'm reflecting on and talking about, but it's my potpourri, if you would, of podcasts that I listen to, that I share with you and reflect on. So your thoughts, it's pinned at the top of my Twitter profile, so long as Twitter profiles persist. Today's the 21st, and maybe Twitter offices will be open and we will continue using Twitter. I'm thankful that it's still here, and after Elon Musk's ultimatum last week. All right, so this morning as I'm listening to episode 91 of the Tom Schimmer podcast. And good morning, Tom. Hope you're doing well. Yes, at the outset, you talk about you get what you get out of Pro D, what you put into Pro D, and I fully believe that. When I go to Pro D sessions, I go with an open mind, and if it's something that I'm a little hesitant about, I still go in with an open mind because I'm like, I could learn something. Or if it's something that I have known something about, then I go with an open mind so that I can get something out of it, and I glean a little smidge every opportunity I can. So that's what's going on here with Fresh Air at 5 as well, is that I listen to podcasts and I get something out of everything I listen to, even if it's just the smallest little bit. So that's great. I agree with you. All right. One more thing coming up in a moment. One more thing for November 21, 2022 on episode 91 of the Tom Schimmer podcast. He talks with Janine Ledford, who is the author of 7 Gems of Intercultural Creativity. And I think that's the title. It's in the show notes for sure. And she brings to us a concept, an idea about cultural teaching and learning about cultures and how that is very much connected and parallels the process of creativity, and how the utility of looking at cultural learning and places that we go and paying attention and open-mindedness and trying new things and paying attention to cultural norms is important for our creative brains. And I was really encouraged this morning because I have grown up until in the past few years of not thinking that I'm a creative person, and because of artistry challenges. But on the whole, I am a very creative person. I have accepted that, and I do creation and do things in problem-solving ways that meet my world around me. And when there is a problem in my world around me, I use my mind to consider new opportunities. And so important. Janine Ledford, I appreciate it. I appreciate your thoughts about cognitive agility or something. It was something about when you look at a pen, what do you see? You see a pen. And in our adult fixed mindsets, we see these things. There's a fire hydrant. Well, a fire hydrant is simply a tool for a fireman to hook up. That's the proper answer. But what else is it? It's a water fountain. It is a place for a dog to go pee. They didn't make the fire hydrant as a place for a dog to go pee, but it's a great post for that. All right. Thanks so much, Tom. Appreciate it. It was so good. And there's a whole lot more than what I'm saying in this episode. So go take a listen to Janine Ledford as she talks with Tom Schimmer. Peace. Soon. The last thing for November 21, 2022, as Tom wraps up this episode in Assessment Corner, he talks about personalized semester end exams. First thought when I hear that is that's a lot of work. A lot of work. Because how do I personalize an exam like making a personalized learning experience for a student? We get at those things by doing possibly project-based learning or inquiry mindset learning, and allow students to go down paths themselves but for me, the teacher, to create a individualized education plan for 120 students sounds daunting. Okay, that's my initial, got it out. And Tom, you've probably heard these things before. But as far as the personalized semester end exam, creating, prompts and substantive exam responses, test questions for a section of your course, a different unit, significant, you call it a significant learning outcome, and you have those 10 things. You conference with the students, determine what area they need to focus on before the end of the semester, a couple weeks out. Give them an opportunity to dig in and learn, and you do teaching in that area so that students can grow in these different individualized areas of struggle. And then everybody gets a different exam that comes out of like a question bank, but tailored to their needs. I think that's reasonable. I think that it's going to be a lot of work, because we have to rethink how we're testing, rethink how we're asking questions of our students. But at the end of the day, that's what I want. Whenever I'm in a situation where I'm being examined or tested, I want my opportunity to show what I've learned. Part of the challenge for me with this is that maybe we're getting at things that are challenging for the students that they're weak in, and we're testing their weaknesses as opposed to their strengths. All right, that's my thoughts. That's all for today. Peace out. Bye. Hey PLN, it's Tuesday, November 22, 2022. So happy Tuesday to you, wherever you are. And thank you for listening right now here on the Daily on Twitter. And if you don't catch me on the full podcast at the end of the week, I'd encourage you to do so. Take a listen to Fresh Start 5 that comes out at the end of the week. Few faithful listeners. Shout out to Cami Cannikins out of Alberta that I know. She listens faithfully every week, and she's listened to every episode. So thank you, Cami. All right, as we are going here this morning, I'm reflecting on an episode of EdTech Bites. I don't know the episode number, but I'll have it in the show notes and put it in the tweet as well. With Gabriel Carrillo, he was at TCCA. Don't know what that stands for. First letter, guessing Texas. And then 3 other letters, association at the end. But it's an important conference in Texas where educators gather together to talk about tech and different ways of doing the jobs and work that we do. And while he was there, he connected with a number of people on his podcast. And one of those people is one of my favorite people out there, Scott Nunes. And Mr. Scott Nunes, who is now with Canva, but previously an ELA teacher in California and a tech coach, the host of Education Today podcast with Scott Nunes. And yes, I've been a guest a couple times on Scott's podcast, and it was a privilege to be able to talk to Scott and hang with him. And we have had some off-air, Zoom chats over the years, and it's fantastic, Scott, to continue to hear your journey since you've gone to Canva. Haven't heard as much from you because, well, you've been in the corporate and doing the thing and working for a different organization and having different freedoms and not. But I do appreciate hearing from you today as you talk with Gabe. Creativity outside and finding your passion to do something creative, so very important. I had a rough day yesterday, so I got onto my Cricut Maker, and I made a Fresh Start 5 t-shirt. It was super fun, stressful because it's materials. One more thing for November 22, 2022. Okay, I got cut off there as I was wrapping up that last segment, as I was talking about creativity and being creative instead of just working and doing the family thing and all that stuff. And, we have to have our outlets. So I just listened to an episode with Gabriel Carrillo on EdTech Bites as he interviewed Scott Nunes at TCCA. And Scott, you mentioned that getting back to technology artistry is an important thing, and finding a way of creating and making, and that brings you joy and passion. Okay, I started talking about my Cricut maker cutter that I got, and my kids, for my birthday, they gave this to me. They have jobs, and they went and bought me a maker cutter, a cricket maker, and I'm learning the language of crafters and what that means. And I hang out at Michael's in the cricket section and looking at all their vinyl and their, iron-on stuff and this and that. And, I've like, wow, man, I can make t-shirts. I can make t-shirts of anything I want. So what I make a t-shirt of, went and bought the materials. I watched Jennifer Maker. Anybody out there with the cricket, you probably know about Jennifer Maker, and she talks about creativity and making projects, and her tutorials are fantastic. So I watched it, then I watched it again, then I put the material in, and I made sure it was right, and I took my Fresh Air at 5 logo for my podcast, and I black and whited it, and then I put some things in there, and I got creative, and I boldly pressed the button, and it cut out a decal that I was able to iron on my t-shirt. And so I've got my first Fresh Air 5 merch. I don't know if I'm gonna sell it because it's a bunch of work as this way, but I can go to and do some promo and things like that with it, and just make t-shirts for my friends and family. So being creative, super important. Scott, keep on doing that, bro. I'm glad to hear your voice, and keep in touch, Brent. Okay, bye-bye. One more thing for November 22, 2022. Hey, Jake Miller, how are you today? I listened to Tech Bites. No, that was the last one that I listened to, and I had a thought that as I was listening to the EdTech News Brief, I've got a Canva connection between episode 126 of EdTech Bites with Gabe Carrillo and guest Scott Nunes, and episode 14 of the EdTech News Brief with Jake Miller. And so that is the Canva connection. We got Scott Nunes working for Canva. We got Jake Miller talking about Canva and Canva presentations and Canva remote control through collaborative presentations. That's like blowing my mind, Jake. Like, it's crazy. Like, I've been a Canva dabbler trying to get into it, but got some barriers due to other really distracting technology changes in my world. But wow, that sounds like a great plan, great idea. I should probably just jump in and make myself a Canva presentation and practice started using some of these tools that I hear you talking about. So fantastic. Jake goes on about Canva only for a short time, unlike me right now, but he has some updates for us about quizzes. If you're a quizzes user and a paid quizzes user, then there are lots of updates that you will find that you can take advantage of. Me, not a paid quizzes user, not even a quizzes user, so that's maybe another area of growth for me coming. The big announcement that I heard was that there's a merger between ISTE and ASCD, and these two nonprofit organizations are joining together, and ASCD is coming to be part of ISTE under a new umbrella, and curriculum and technology do go together. We all know that, but now it's a confirmation from big business. All right, we'll talk to you guys. A whole bunch of other updates, Google Doc stuff, other things, and yeah, I'm happy to be right here, right now, sharing with you this. So go listen to Jake's podcast and have a fab day. Talk to you. Bye. Hey, PLN, November 23, 2022. It's Wednesday. It's the middle of the week already. Man, it's flying. You find it's flying? I notice these things. And notice is a big part of going through your days. It slows you down and brings you back to the present as you notice. So noticing is so important because it keeps us grounded in the now. And then moving forward, we can keep on noticing. All right, so what's that got to do with this and that? This morning, I listened to episode 136 of the Teaching Champions podcast with Brian Martin. And this is the episode that I was gunning for when I first listened to his podcast. But I listened to an older episode from the summer with Zach Rondo and Grayson McGilvery, and that was a fantastic episode. So it was a good starter episode for me for listening to Teaching Champions. But this episode is with Lainey Rowell, episode 136 of Teaching Champions. You should go and listen to this. I haven't gotten Lainey's book, but I've been connected with Lainey just through listening to podcasts and doing reflections here about my take on what is going on her podcast. And her podcast, Evolving with Gratitude, is so encouraging, and I really appreciate, Lainey, you doing a podcast about gratitude, because gratitude is something that we all need in our lives to be better for our health and our well-being. And in this episode, you talk about a number of things. You talk about the 6-to-1 ratio. You talk about positive to negative things to say to people. You talk about making sure all students are seen and heard. You talk about the 4 things: the notice, the think, the feel, and the do. And those are so important. Something that really stood out to me was the notice part. You know, that's what I opened here with, is the notice part. So important that we notice and pay attention to the good things that are going on around us. Notice all the things, but pay attention so that we don't miss the flowers and the beautiful things. All right, thank you, Lainey. Thank you, Brian. Bye-bye. Hey PLN, it's Friday, November 25, 2022. Good morning to you, and it is soaking wet out here. Not like downpour, but it's wet. I'm damp, and I'm out for my morning walk. It's refreshing. Yes, so it's the end of the week. It's Friday. It's been a really full week here, and it's not lightening up anytime soon. Report cards are in progress, and got to get those done today. Some other things going on, newsletter thinking, and yes, we are, it's Black Friday, so I got to think about buying tech and maybe looking at a printer. Not sure, because I need a new printer that can print Cricut vinyl sheets, so I can use my Cricut cutter maker and be able to make stickers. So, okay, this morning as I'm walking, I listened to episode 125 of Got Tech, the podcast with Eric Geis and Nick Johnson. And gents, it's so good to hear your voice. And I take away a lot of thoughts as I listen to your episodes. And this morning as I was listening, you guys mentioned my podcast. And, you know, it's still surreal when people do that. But I do appreciate the shout out. I appreciate the recommendation that people take a listen to Fresh Air at 5. I do this for myself. I do this so that I can share my learning with others, and that's why I record my podcast. You guys talked about 3 tools that were old tools that you like, and 3 tools that are up and comings for you, and a couple of educational thoughts. And people, it's so good to listen to Eric and Nick because they're thoughtful and reflective in how they use the tools that they use. And that's the point. It's not about the tool. It's about what you're trying to do with it. And does this make sense? That's what educational duct tape is all about. It's not about the tool. It's all about with Jake Miller. So shout out to Jake Miller, one of my other fave podcasters. So yes, gents, so thankful. Happy U.S. Thanksgiving. I trust that you guys are recovering from your turkey coma, because Eric, sounds like you're eating a lot of turkey. Smoking sounds pretty good. Okay, we'll talk to you guys later. Happy Friday. Bye-bye. As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoyed this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. tweet about your experience, or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, Podcasts for Educators, Podcasts by Educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself because you're worth it.